The clock was almost midnight when Sarah finally arrived at the hotel. Her business trip had been tiring and long, and all she wanted was a peaceful place to rest. The Ravenwood Hotel, an imposing stone building, stood darkly against the night sky, giving it a mysterious, ancient air. The lobby was almost deserted when Sarah entered. Only a middle-aged attendant stood behind the counter, looking at her with a serious expression. He handed Sarah the room key. His eyes seemed to hide dark secrets. "Welcome, miss. If you need anything, we're available," said the attendant with a forced smile. Sarah nodded, trying not to let her uneasiness show. She grabbed the key and made her way to the elevator, noticing that the hotel's lighting was dim and uninviting. With each click of boots on the marble floor, a melancholic sound echoed that increased the feeling of desolation. The elevator took her silently to the third floor. When the doors opened, Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. The hallways were dimly lit, and the faded wallpaper gave the place an air of decay. She followed the hallway until she found room 326, inserted the key, and entered. The inside of the room was dark, only a dim lamp hanging from the ceiling. Sarah sighed in relief when she saw that the bed was neatly made and looked inviting. She was exhausted and just wanted a good night's sleep before her work commitment the next day. She locked the bedroom door, took off her shoes, and started getting ready for bed. However, something felt off. The light on the ceiling blinked intermittently, as if there was an electrical problem. Dismissing this as a common occurrence in old hotels, she lay down on the bed and tried to relax. Sarah had no idea that tonight would be very different from any other. The darkness of the room seemed to envelop her, and the silence was almost oppressive. She closed her eyes and tried to let the tiredness overcome her. However, before she could fall asleep, a strange sound brought her out of her thoughts. It was as if someone was dragging something heavy across the floor in the hallway. Sarah sat up in bed, listening intently. The sound continued, getting louder and closer. Curious and a little worried, she took out her cell phone and used the light from the screen to illuminate the room. She waited, listening to the shuffling sounds get louder and louder until they finally reached her door. A metallic noise echoed as if a key was being inserted into a lock. Sarah's heart began to beat uncontrollably. She asked aloud, "Who's there?" There was no response, just the continuous sound of someone trying to open the door. Terrified, she slowly approached the door and looked through the peephole. What she saw made her catch her breath. In the dark and empty corridor, there was no one. The sound of someone trying to open the door stopped, leaving her with an uneasy feeling. She looked down the hallway once more, but saw nothing but shadows. Sarah went back to bed, trying to convince herself that she was just tired and imagining things. However, something in the back of his mind told him something was wrong. The night was just beginning, and the Ravenwood Hotel held dark secrets that she was about to discover. Sarah was lying in bed, trying to calm her racing heart. The strange episode with the door had made her nervous, but she refused to believe that something sinister was happening at the Ravenwood Hotel. It was just one night. She tried to convince herself, and soon she would be out of this place. However, the silence that followed that disturbance brought no relief. The darkness in the room seemed thicker than ever, and the sounds from the hotel were almost inaudible. Sarah tried to relax, closing her eyes and forcing herself to think about pleasant things. In the middle of the night, something woke her from her light sleep. It was a strange sound, a shuffling of feet that echoed through the hallway. Sarah sat up in bed, her breathing getting faster as the sound got closer. It looked as if someone was dragging something heavy across the floor. She took out her cell phone and activated the flashlight, illuminating the room. The sound continued, now clearer and more disturbing. There was no denying that someone was out there in the hotel hallways. With courage, Sarah got up from the bed and approached the bedroom door. She pressed her ear against the cold wood, trying to identify the source of the sound. It seemed to be coming from the hallway, but something was wrong. The shuffling was slow and deliberate, as if someone was approaching her door. Adrenaline coursed through her veins when Sarah realized someone was knocking on her door. Soft but persistent knocks echoed throughout the room. Her heart beat wildly as she remained motionless, not knowing what to do. "Who's there?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. There was no response, only the sound of knocking continued. She approached the door, fear driving her to investigate. When she looked through the peephole, she hoped to see a face or some clue as to who was outside. However, all he saw was an empty, dark hallway, lit only by dim, flickering light. Unrest grew within her. Something wasn't right, and the feeling of danger invaded her. But she couldn't just ignore what was happening. She decided to leave the room and check the hallway. Holding her cell phone with the flashlight on, Sarah carefully opened the door. The hallway was plunged into darkness, and the dim lamps flickered as if struggling to maintain their light. She took a few unsteady steps, looking up and down the hall. That's when she saw a shadowy figure at the end of the hallway, near the fire escape. The stranger had his back to her, wearing a dark cloak that hid his identity. He seemed to be looking out the window, as if he was waiting for something. "Who are you?" Sarah asked, her voice shaking. There was no response, just the eerie silence that hung over the hallway. She took a few steps towards the figure, but before she could get closer, the figure disappeared into the shadows. Fear gripped Sarah, and she quickly retreated to her room, locking the door behind her. Her heart was racing, and she